As you know, nobody expected John Tierney, Johnny Pockets, to be reelected in the 6th Congressional District. His wife went to the can. One of his brothers-in-law is in the can. He is described, both of his brothers-in-law, one is in the can, one's on the lam, from federal racketeering indictments, and both of them described John Tierney as the biggest liar in the world. His stepson was a collector. Tierney's stepson was a collector for the mob, and his late father-in-law was the guy who actually set up this gambling ring that has been running amok, and it was a big money gambling ring. One of the another associate had to give the feds $24 million. That's what he had to forfeit. $24 million. So Tierney was so sure apparently that he was going to lose that he didn't even make any public appearances on the day before the election. Didn't alert the media to where he was going to be, et cetera, et cetera. Then imagine the surprise and chagrin of the people when the votes were counted on Tuesday night. And it came in that Tierney had 179,603 votes, and Richard Tassay, the Republican, had 175,953. But neither of them got a majority because there was a third candidate in the race, and that was the Libertarian candidate, Dan Fishman from Beverly. And Dan Fishman got 16,668 votes. Tassay spent about $4 million. Tierney spent about $4 million, and Dan Fishman spent $12,000, including $8,000 or $9,000 of his own money. And I was talking to him today for a column, and I just thought he'd be an interesting person to have on, Dan Fishman, to discuss his third-party run. Dan, thanks for being with us here on the Howie Carr Show.
Howie, a real pleasure to be on your show. I've listened for a long time.
Thanks. Well, listen, the first question, Dan, is, do you feel bad that you may have drained off just enough votes to stop Tassay from eliminating this blister on the body politic, John Tierney?
I absolutely do not feel bad about that. If I had not been in the race, I would have voted for Richard Tassay, but I was not in the race to weaken either candidate. I was in the race to restore power to the people. I feel like the people's voice at this point in time is no longer being represented in Congress by professional politicians. And, however much I liked getting to know Richard Tassay personally, he is a professional politician. He has been in the State House for a long time. And I feel like those, at this point in time, professional politicians have a different agenda than the common person who feels like common sense has left Congress.
But you said, though, if you hadn't been in it, you would have voted for Tassay. I mean, so you obviously think Tassay was the lesser of two evils here. So yet we are now in Massachusetts, and especially people who live in the 6th District are now faced with being represented by the greater of two evils.
No, I think you have it exactly right, though when you talk about the lesser of two evils, one of the quotes that was on the front of my campaign page, it said, Edmund Burke, who said, "All that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing." And so I couldn't sit by and do no
But is Tassay evil? I think we can all agree that Tierney is evil. But is Tassay evil?
So I will disagree with the context of evil in terms of a socialistic sort of thing. But in terms of politically, John Tierney and I are very, very different. However, I don't want to demonize and say evil in that respect. But I certainly disagree with the way he has voted. I disagree with their idea of what makes sense for fiscal policy. But I disagree very strongly with the Republicans as well. I do not believe the Republicans have any interest at all in cutting the deficit. I think that John Boehner cannot wait to make a deal so that they can raise the debt ceiling. And they talked about it immediately after the election. "Oh, Mr. President, I just want you to know that we are going to work with you and make sure that we do what we have to do." For me, the number one threat to the country right now is the national debt. And I was the only candidate who's committed immediately that I would never vote to raise the national debt.
But here, Dan Fishman, you're a software engineer.
Yep.
Right? From a middle-class guy from a middle-class town, Beverly, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Who would have done better for the middle class, Tassay or Tierney?
That's like asking, would you rather start bailing out the Titanic with a teaspoon or a paper cup? The Titanic's going to sink no matter what, unless somebody gets out and says, listen, we have to plug the hole. And that's what I want to do, is I want to plug the hole in our spending right now.
Dan, I'm glad you listened to the show, and you had every right to run and all that. But it just seems to me that that you might be having second thoughts about this.
I definitely have no second thoughts about it.
You know what Tierney's record is? I mean, do you believe? I mean, he didn't pay. You and I have to pay taxes. He didn't pay. He and his wife didn't pay taxes on $200,000 plus that they claimed was a gift. I mean, why? But yet he's laughing up his sleeve because he got reelected because somebody came in and sliced off just enough votes.
So we all had to enter a form with the House Ethics Committee talking about how much money we made, where all the sources were, et cetera. And according to the last one, that $200,000 gift was not on there. I think that is a violation of the House Ethics Standards, and I think that they will investigate it. I agree with Richard Tassay's call and the Sunshine Committee's call for an investigation into that sort of thing. I think that is the proper thing about it. But if neither candidate, if my views aren't out there, if I'm not representing them, people are going to think, you know what? Nobody cares about actually cutting the deficit. Nobody thinks the deficit is that big of a deal. And there's other things. The suspension of habeas corpus. When they passed the National Defense Authorization Act and said, you know what, if we suspect terrorism, we can lock you up without a warrant, we can hold you without right to a trial. That is a huge issue, and nobody.
How about Obama? How about Obamacare, Dan? I mean, Tierney was marching in lockstep with them while they took away our freedom, and and before too long, Obamacare is going to start actually killing people.
I have 100% agreement with you. I am completely opposed to the idea of a monolithic healthcare system, but I do not believe that the Republicans were going to be able to repeal it, no matter what they thought. There's never going to be. I mean, the Democrats are not. No matter what the most optimistic thing was, the Senate would have been at least 41 Democrats. They would have been able to filibuster against anything that was going to happen. And I was certainly convinced that Obama was going to win, just because at this point in time, the GOP is running on a social policy from 1950. They need to understand that there is a fiscal conservative viewpoint, and there's one of my favorite quotes. Frederick Bastiat said, "The worst thing that can happen to a cause is not to be skillfully attacked, but to be poorly defended." And the biggest thing that's happening in the United States right now is that the Republican Party is the defender of fiscal conservatism, but they're doing a terrible job because they are marrying it to social conservatism.
But look at this though. Look what's happened. Look what's happened here in this election. You had a chance in Montana to knock off a hypocritical Democrat who is a big conservative when he's in Montana, but he does whatever Harry Reid tells him to do in Washington. You lost 2 congressional seats in Arizona because guys like you from the Libertarian Party drained off just enough Republican votes to throw it to the Democrats. I mean, it's counterproductive, isn't it, to have a party that has even less concerns about individual freedom than.
I disagree. Well, first of all, I mean, where would you say that Todd Akin has any blame in this? I mean, does his statement affect the natural election?
Yes, he's a fool, obviously.
Right, and then the fact that he wouldn't withdraw in the first place,
yes,
that's hard every Republican who was running.
But again, though, you're in the same boat as Todd Akin. You didn't say anything that stupid, but when you saw that this was going to be a tight election, you didn't withdraw and make it easier for a more palatable guy to get elected.
But I mean, we come back to the same situation in that you're saying that I should support a guy that I disagree with fundamentally. The fact that I think that he is a little bit less bad than John Tierney was in terms of a fiscal policy doesn't mean that I think that my view should not be heard, because I believe that if my view gets out there, if it gets represented, people are going to start coming over it, and especially in Massachusetts. The Mass GOP, they made this bet when they kicked out all the Ron Paul delegates, and when they went down to Kansas,
now we're getting into that again.
Well, but you can't ignore it. You can't think it happened. That was the end.
So is this payback for the Ron Paul crowd?
It is not payback. I announced my running. My webpage went up actually 10 months ago, last December. So I've been in this race long before that. However, it should not shock the Republican Party that the Ron Paul supporters did not show up to vote for their candidate. Okay. And I can tell you, too, we were at the Libertarian State Convention 2 weeks ago. We're going to run 9 candidates for U.S. Congress, 1 in each district in 2014. There is a message here of fiscal conservatism that can be married with social tolerance, that at least can get rid of the idea that social conservatism, the idea, if you are in favor of small government, if you're in favor of limited government, you should believe in limited government all the time. And that's what we represent. And we are finding that that message resonates tremendously.
What would you tell Tassé, as you know, is taking this thing pretty hard?
I do. And I feel terrible. I have to tell you, having met the guy, having spent time with him, we had a drink together in North Andover after the debate there. I have a tremendous amount of respect for that man, because it's one thing to talk about social liberties, but it's another thing to walk the walk, and he has done that. And I really...
And you kept him out of Congress.
So I would generally disagree with that number, because whatever you want to say about my campaign, John Tierney also got 179,000 votes. And so it's not like there was no support for him in the beginning. If you want to say, all 16,000 people who voted for me would have voted for him, I don't know that that's true.
Not all of them. I mean, you told me this morning, you were doing your tracking polls, and
right.
some people said they'd vote for
Yep.
Tierney, some for Tassé. But I mean, just the majority of if you're going to vote Libertarian, you're more likely to pull a Republican ballot.
I strongly disagree with that, because one of the things that Libertarians are definitely true is that we are much more socially tolerant in terms of how we believe government should be involved in people's personal lives. Democrats,
and you're not going to get a much more socially tolerant guy than Rich Tassé, who is gay.
Well, first of all, I don't believe that being gay has anything to do with being socially tolerant. Okay, that is a lifestyle choice that has nothing to do with politics. But I will say that he has been sympathetic to ideas of civil liberty because he is in a minority that has been oppressed. But I think that
hold on. I want you, Barbara Anderson from Citizens for Limited Taxation. I think she wants to lay into you there, Dan.
I'm very familiar with Ms. Anderson.
Okay, go ahead, Barbara.
Not very familiar. It's not like we're friends or anything, and if we ever were, we no longer are. But Howie, you've known me for 30 years, and I assure you, you have never seen me as angry at any political candidate, if that's the word, as I am at this person who just guaranteed that John Tierney is going to continue to be my congressman, when I could have had Richard Tassé, who is as close to a libertarian as I was ever going to have. And I cannot express how furious I am at what this person has done just for ego, just to hear the sound of his own voice so he could get into some debates and be important for a while and destroy everything for the rest of us.
Dan, respond.
I didn't hear a question there. I'm
not asking you a question. I'm not even speaking to you. I'm talking to the audience.
Right. Okay. I mean, trust me, nobody would run as a third-party candidate for ego. There is a sacrifice that happens. I still, unlike the rest of the guys, I work a 9-to-5 job, and it's not a 9-to-5 job. It's really an 8-to-7 job. And so I had to do this on top of everything else. People who saw me doing standouts, people I met in person, they will not have any question about whether or not this was an ego trip. I did it because there's a message that is not being represented in government right now, and it's not being represented by either the Republicans or the Democrats. And I feel very strongly that debt is an enormous issue, and nobody is talking about it. If I felt like the Republicans were going to address these issues, I wouldn't have run. But I have been convinced over the last 20 years that the Republicans could care less. Now, I disagree with Ralph Nader on everything except for about 2 things. But one of the things that he did say is that both the Republicans and Democrats are competing to serve their corporate masters. And I very strongly believe that that is absolutely true. My campaign was predicated on the idea of not taking any corporate money.
Dan, he was
an advocate and earned his right to run as a third party. What have you done that earned your right to destroy Rich Tassé's candidacy and make John Tierney my congressman for the rest of my life?
I missed the first part of what you said.
Put yourself to Ralph Nader, for crying out loud.
Yes. I'm just saying that what did I do? I am a citizen. I am a citizen of this country. And I believe that the idea of our government is predicated on the idea of a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And we're predicated on the idea of no more kings, no more princes, no more peasants.
What do you think? I've never heard any of this crap before. What does this have to do with the fact that John Tierney is still my congressman when I could have had at least quasi-libertarian representing me?
I don't see the connection. I'm sorry that you feel that way, Barbara, but I do not see that my running has anything to do with, except for the idea that I'm expressing my ideas, and those ideas resonated. And the fact that they resonated is not.
Yeah, I've been trying these ideas for 30 years. They don't resonate enough to get anybody elected.
Dan, there's an old saying, everybody has the right to do whatever they want to do, but you don't have the right to be able to plot the consequences of your actions. You had the right to run, but now the consequences of your actions have irritated a huge number of people.
I wish the Republicans believed that everybody has the right to do what they want to do, but they don't. They oppose gay marriage. And I recognize that Richard does not feel that way. However, on the federal campaign, there is a Republican platform that absolutely is restrictive of individual liberties. And that was the sort of thing that I was running to oppose, because I believe that individual liberties, everybody should have the right to do what they want to do. And that is not what the National Republican Party stands for.
Supports gay marriage. Richard Tassay supports women's rights. So why are you trying to pretend that he doesn't?
I'm not. Listen, Barbara.
What are you talking about then? The election was between Tierney and Tassay, not Tassay and the rest of the Republican Party.
So I defended Richard Tassay publicly against accusations that he was a Tea
how
Party Republican.
nice of you.
Yeah.
Oh, you defended him. Oh, wonderful. Here's what it was, Howie. He was on the ballot as noted, not as the principles of the Libertarian Party. He was there as none of the above. So people who didn't want to vote for Tierney, and some Democrats didn't for good reason, and Republicans who didn't want to vote for Tassay because they were either anti-gay bigots or independents who didn't like the negative ads, they had some place to go. They didn't know who Dan Fishman was, nor did they care. He was none of the above, and he filled that place, and he elected John Tierney, my congressman.
First of all, I would say that none of the above is a valid choice, because the fact of the matter is that if you're not satisfied with either one of your candidates, you should absolutely be able to express that view. I don't buy the idea that you have to take either sometimes we say that American politics right now is either a slap in the face or a kick in the shins. And if you don't pick one or the other, they say you can't complain.
Clever. What a clever phrase. You do have so many clever phrases, don't you? It's just wonderful to hear all the clever phrases and all the ideology and all the things that have never worked, have never solved a problem, who just have libertarians talking to each other, blah, 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 accomplishing nothing. And here the rest of us are just trying to have a country, and in my case, just trying to have a congressman that I can relate to on at least half the issues.
Yeah, Dan, I mean, this guy Tierney, forget about the corruption. I mean, he is a rubber stamp for Nancy Pelosi. She poured hundreds of thousands of dollars into his campaign until she thought it was hopeless. I mean, he just does whatever she tells him to do. And you know what she said? She said we have to pass the bill before we can read it. I mean, you're helping you talk a good game, but you made Nancy Pelosi very happy when she got the results in from the 6th District of Massachusetts.
So I do not believe in the idea of a politics that I have to be for me and you have to be for you, and that means that we are against each other. I believe that we can both be for ourselves and advocate a system in which a government is of all of us. I don't believe that it has to be black and white. I don't believe it has to be
Republican. I don't believe I have to have a coherent statement. I just have to get on the ballot. Now, here's what he could have done, Howie. He could have run, and if he meant this, he could have run in the primary against Richard Tassay and made his case out there in the public, in the primary, when everyone's paying attention, and he could have tried to win on the issues against Richard in a primary. Instead, he goes on as the third party, NOTA, none of the above candidate, and ruins it for all of us.
Yeah, I'm not registered as a Republican, so obviously I couldn't run in the primary. I suppose I could have changed my party, except that libertarians are, as you pointed out, Barbara, principle is important to us. And you wrote this in your comment on the Salem News, and you're exactly right. Principle is important to us. And honestly, if I saw more principled politicians in Congress, I probably wouldn't feel the necessity to run, but I don't see that right now.
The reality of what you did, Dan, and again, you had the right to do it, but the reality, you talk about principles, you reelected a guy with absolutely zero principles.
I like to think that what I did more than anything else is to begin the resurgence of the Libertarian Party, the insurgence of the Libertarian Party, a party that is dedicated to actual fiscal conservatism and actual smaller government in Massachusetts and then in the United States. And that's what we're running for. We're not running for ego. We're not running for anything else. We're running because no other party is representing the idea of limited government.
Go and run, but not when there's a viable candidate. If there had been no one running, and we've had issues like that up here in the 6th, when nobody was running against the incumbent, then by all means, that's your perfect chance to go out there, get your signatures, and run and get the ideas out there. But when there is a candidate who is the best thing the Libertarians are going to get, someone who, by the way, would have voted against Obamacare, thank you for making sure that I will always have Obamacare. If you had done it that way because there was no other candidate, I've even thought of it myself, but once there's a decent candidate running, then you withdraw and you work for that candidate, the person who put himself out there and worked his tail off and actually did work, actually was out there, not just waiting to be invited to the next debate so he could mouth off the way libertarians love to do. But you didn't.
Listen, Dan. What about Ron Paul? He was a Libertarian candidate for president in 1988, and he stepped aside. He didn't run as a third party candidate, and as a matter of fact, his son went on all kinds of radio talk shows, including this one, begging people not to go third party, not to vote for Gary Johnson because it was such an important election to get rid of some of these crazy Democrats.
We're not monolithic like that. Libertarians do not believe that you have to necessarily vote the party line 100% of the time. And, another guy who feels this way is Scott Brown. Scott Brown's a guy who was able to look at each individual and make individual decisions. In this case, I felt like we were at a crossroads. We were at a critical crossroads. The debt is going to destroy our country, and that's the biggest threat. Healthcare certainly ACA certainly adds to the debt, and there's a bunch of other issues going on, but the number one threat to our country is the debt. And I was the only candidate I felt who was representing the idea that the debt has to be cut, and we have to agree not to raise the debt ceiling. That's what I'm running for. I'm running for that fundamental principle, and if I didn't say it, it wouldn't have been said at all in this campaign, because without me, there would have been no discussion of issues. There only would have been back and forth over whose family committed the worst crime.
Dan, the only thing you're going to be remembered for in this campaign, from this campaign, is costing Richard Tassay the seat.
And electing John Tierney.
Yeah, I honestly disagree with that assessment. From our numbers, that's not the opinion we got, but I recognize the fact that people are going to feel that way, and I absolutely will accept that criticism as valid criticism that people feel. I'm not going to, if I had it all to do over again, I would still do the same thing, because this message of having a limited government is more important than anything else in politics right now, because as far as I'm concerned, the Republicans and Democrats are both working towards a larger government. One's going to the right and one's going to the left, but neither is interested in limiting the power of the federal government.
But we had a chance to knock off one of the most liberal and one of the most corrupt members of the House of Representatives.
I honestly don't see a giant difference between John Tierney and Richard Tassay. If you look at
what
happened
is such
in terms
a lie.
The
That
debates
is
that
such
they
a
had on their records.
No, maybe it's not a lie. Maybe it's just stupid that you can't see the difference. And the people who voted for you couldn't sit down for 10 minutes and look at the difference between the two candidates, so they took the easy way out and they voted for none of the above.
Well, Barbara, if your assessment of me is that I'm stupid, I guess that's going to be your assessment of it.
Well, I'm still choosing between stupid and simply in love with the sound of your own voice and your silly principles that you haven't been able as a party to get across to enough people to get elected as libertarians, which is why we have to go with what we have a chance to win with.
I believe that people who stand up for their principles are always going
crap,
to be criticized by people who aren't interested in upholding principles. But there are some things that I'm not willing to compromise on, and I truly believe that we are meant to be a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And at this point in time, there are no average people in Congress anymore.
But you Dan,
you're trying to reason with someone.
You're trying.
A libertarian.
We got the John Tierney. Those are these are fine sentiments, but the reality is you have delivered John Tierney back. You know what? You've been with him. You know how cynical he is. I'll bet. You know what? I wouldn't be surprised if he's listening to this and laughing up his sleeve.
So I will say that in my conversations with both candidates personally, I found them both to be very passionate people about their specific issues. And this is true for both candidates. And I was able to discuss the issues with both guys backstage, and I can tell you that they are both considered and deliberate thinkers about their issues. And although I disagree with both of them strongly, the fact that we were able to have that sort of refreshing conversation, I wish that the electorate had seen the candidates that I was able to see up close and personal, because those guys, there's certainly scandal involved here. There's no question about it. And I understand that people are upset about that, and I'm shocked that 179,000 people would think that that scandal was insignificant enough to still vote for the congressman. But that being said, getting a chance to actually talk with them and understand and have a discourse for their opinions, that's what our conversation should be about as a country. We should be talking to people and saying, explain to me where you're coming from. And I don't believe that removing a voice from the conversation ever benefits the country.
Oh, Howard, he talked to them backstage, and they're both the same. They're such nice people. How can anyone be that moronic and naive and still have existed this long on this planet in this state?
He doesn't. He does. He has. Dan, I don't know. Barbara and I have seen these people up close and personal for all these years, and we know what we're up against. And when we get a chance to trade in a Tierney for it to say, I mean, we're not gonna worry about Edmund Burke. We're just gonna try to get a little bit of improvement in the commonweal.
But see, I don't see that at all. I don't see that our federal government has improved at all, really, over the last 20 years, since Reagan, as far as I'm concerned, because we have been on a steady path of the federal government increasing in power and increasing in power and increasing in power. You want to talk about the Patriot Act getting passed. You want to talk about increase of federal power. That is the sort of thing that I am opposed to. I believe that all power generates from the people.
Blah, 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 blah. Like we've never thought of any of this before. I mean, gee, Howie, I never would have thought of any of this. What an amazing revelation to get a chance to listen to this person and actually think about things like Edmund Burke and by the people, of the people, for the people, and principle. Did you all by yourself ever think of these things?
Fortunately not. Fortunately, I had a group of founding fathers who laid down these principles and a Bill of Rights and a Constitution that, as far as I'm concerned, is the greatest document ever written by man.
Again, the Pauls knew, Rand and Ron knew that this was an important election, and they believe everything you believe. They're libertarians,
yeah.
and they set aside their differences for realizing that this common enemy of all freedom-loving people had to be defeated. And I mean, if
Ron
there
Paul
is
did
a
not
big
endorse Mitt
difference.
Romney.
Well, he didn't endorse him, but he didn't run as a third-party candidate, did he?
Yeah, well,
and Rand was out campaigning for Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan.
Yeah, and I honestly, that's something that I don't agree with, but that's his choice.
Crap. Howie, can you hear me? I mean, am I on the air at the moment?
Yes, you are.
I have to say goodbye.
Okay.
Can I say goodbye? I just want to thank you so much for letting me on, because I really needed to vent. I am so angry. Thank you so much.
Okay, Barbara. I'll talk to you soon. All right, Dan. We'll let you go too if you want. I appreciate you being on and taking this. And I don't know. I feel so bad for Richard Tassay, and you know what? And I don't live in the 6th district, but I was looking forward to having Tassay as a congressman, just because he would have been something different than the run of the mill Democrat rubber stamp for Nancy Pelosi hack.
I completely understand what you're saying, and I understand people who feel that way. But I want you to know that there is a large contingency of people, and it is growing, who feel that Republicans and Democrats are both complicit in a crime against the American people. And this is what's happening. The federal government is increasing its authority, and it's taking it away from the people. And that is a real problem.
Okay.
Neither Republican nor Democrat is standing up against that.
Do you want to say anything to Richard? He's probably listening tonight. Do you want to say anything to him?
He knows the tremendous amount of respect I have for him, and I think that we said it all when we spoke to each other.
All right. Thanks for being with us, Dan Fishman. Dan Fishman was the Libertarian candidate in the 6th Congressional District. Tierney, the incredibly corrupt congressman incumbent going for his 9th term, got 179,000 votes. Tassay, the Republican, got 176,000 votes, and Dan Fishman, running as a Libertarian, got 16,668 votes, and that's why Tassay, in my opinion, that's why Tassay is not going to be the next congressman. 1-877-469-4322. I'm Howie Carr.